The paper, in a sense, is my own autobiography. That's what I should say. The paper is divided into 3 sections. The first section is about the context, where I will just try to explain the importance of 90s, the impact of 90s on the Tamil scene, which I think I will skip, because we all know that the impact of East European crisis and USSR collapse. It has broad impact on different parts of India, and Tamil had its own way of responding to it. So that's the first part, and translation played a crucial role in responding to this 90s crisis. So that is the first part of my paper. And the second part of the paper is about how an intellectual collective called Nirapirigai, it's name of a magazine. In English it's called the Spectrum. It is translated as Nirapirigai. It is a magazine and it is also an intellectual collective, which is a group of 3 people who were the editors of the magazine. They came out of the ML party, especially in the context when the party was not able to answer the questions raised in the 90s, USSR collapse. And the third section is about how the raise of the Dalit question came partly from Nirapirigai, and also it disagreed with some of the assumptions of Nirapirigai. So what unites the 3 sections is the way the Tamil context responded to the concept of subjectivity, how it has imbibed the concept of subjectivity and how it used and responded and remodified in the late 90s. I straight away go to the second section. Actually, the Nirapirigai was started as a magazine which aimed to challenge the culture of little magazines. So, if you want to understand the impact of Nirapirigai or the culture of the Nirapirigai, you must have an idea of the little magazines right from the 40s in Tamil Nadu. So, I will just read out a small history of that little magazine. Moving away from the strictly nationalist, anti-colonial content of the magazines like Sudeshamitran, India. So these are the magazines where nationalists like Subramania Bharatiya worked. The popular magazines like Ananda Vigadan, Kalaimagal, Manjali, Dinamani, Daily. And the little magazines, Manikodi, Ra, focused on aspects of literary modernity. So in the 40s and 50s, you have 3 kinds of magazines coming out. One is purely nationalist, which is part of the national struggle, and the other one is popular magazines. Then the third one is little magazines. So all the 3 magazines somehow shared the idea of nationalism, directly or indirectly, but the only difference in the little magazines is that it foregrounded an idea of modernism, literary modernism, in alliance with nationalism. In the 60s, magazines like Ilakkiya Tadam, Kanayali, Pirangi focused on art and aesthetics. It somehow goes towards a movement of art for art's sake. Then in the 70s and 80s, the little magazines like Layam, Ak, Jnanaratham, Nigal, Padigal, Nadai, Kasada Davara expressed their hesitation to limit themselves to a literary modernism and turn towards issues of society and culture necessitated by the vacuum created during the post-emergency period. So the magazines which came in the late 70s and the early 80s, they were quite uncomfortable with the straightforward nationalism that was highlighted in the magazines and the literary modernism that was circulating in the 40s through 60s. So they somehow looked at literary modernism as a kind of a elitist way of looking at literature and society. So they moved towards a kind of interdisciplinary focus in the magazines. So this was also a kind of response to the emergency period. So there are magazines which gave special importance to some of the ideologues and intellectuals. For example, the magazine Jnanaradam brought out a special issue in 1974, May-July, exclusively on Solzhenitsyn. Then magazine Layam brought out a special issue in 80 on Mouni and Marquis, Marquis. Then there were also strictly Marxist magazines like Araichi, Pudiya Talaimurai. This is a folklore magazine started by Professor Varmamalai. He was almost the father of Tamil folklore, and he was also father of the early Marxist tradition. And you also have magazines like Tamarai, Semmalar, which debated on the issues of feudalism and class conflict. In the Tamil context, they were considered as classical Marxists. And there were also special issues in little magazines on hippie movement and anarchist movements in the magazine called Padigal. Now, what is interesting in these magazines is the history will give you an idea of how the little magazines try to give you an alternative image of society and culture and literature. So actually it started with an idea of nationalism and kind of pure modernism, which somehow imitated Western modernism. And you have translations of T.S. Eliot's writings and James Joyce's prose pieces and short stories which appeared. T.S. Eliot's poetry also appeared, Ezra Pound appeared. So they somehow looked at European modernism as a model, which I think in the late 80s was quite uncomfortable for some of the Marxist scholars, so they tried to move beyond that literary modernism. Then what happened in the 80s when they moved beyond literary modernism? They were quite fascinated with the ideas of existentialism of Nietzsche, Heidegger. Heidegger and Nietzsche appeared in little magazines, and you have translations of Marx writings coming in this period. A Marxist scholar called S.V. Rajagarai, he first wrote a book on alienation, which came in the year 1971, but the second reprint of the magazine was a revised one, which appeared in 1975, where he initiated the discussion on the subject formation, where he used the word agat tanmai, which refers to some kind of self-knowing, or the words somehow related to self. Though he was referring to subject formation, he was using a Tamil translation which refers a kind of self. Then there are two other important scholars called Tamilavan who wrote a book on structuralism. So he was almost considered as the father figure for the theoretical tradition in Tamil. So he never translated any piece, but he wrote a full-length book on structuralism where he used the terms synonymously. He used the word agam. Agam refers to the being, which is a Heideggerian term, and he also used the word tan. Tan is not me but myself, oneself. And he also used the word manidan. Manidan refers to the human quality, the sense of realizing oneself as human. And he also used the word tannilai. And the word tannilai also appeared in S.V. Rajagarai's 75-year edition of Anniyamadal, Alienation. Now the word tannilai later became an established translation for the word subjectivity. But when it was used in the 80s, it was referring only to the word subject and subject formation, and it was used only as a concept. But later on in the 90s, when the word was established as a technical term, it was freely used by all the translators, anyone who talked about Marxism. I'll just list out the 6 translations of the word subjectivity. As I told you, the first translation was by Tamilavan, in the year 72. It was translated as Than, which literally refers to egoistic self-claim, but has been used to suggest the idea of oneself as different from self-me. Then the term Manidan suggested the idea of human as different from individual. These two terms, Than and Manidam, were used synonymously by Tamilavan in his book Structuralism. Then the word Agam was used by S.V. Rajadurai, but it was again revived in the early 90s. Even when the word Tannilai was established, the word Agam was revived by the feminist circle. Because, let me just explain the word Tannilai and then go back to Agam. The word Tannilai was actually a grammatical term. It refers to the first person. Tannilai, Munnilai, Padarkai, first, second, third person. So they were quite convinced with the word Tannilai because it is grammatical, because it is a grammatical term. They thought that they could capture the semiotic and linguistic assumption of that concept, subjectivity. But even after establishing the word Tannilai, feminists wanted to have the word Agam. Because Agam, the word Tannilai seems to be a kind of theoretical, objective way of understanding subjectivity. But Agam was a term which refers to internal, personal. So because they wanted to bring in the idea of personal as political, they preferred the term Agam rather than Tannilai. But also they have used synonymously. The term Tannilai is grammatical category meaning the first person, which arrived at different. It was arrived at after a series of discussions conducted by Nirapirigai among the intellectuals of various ideological interests. Though Tamilavan used this term in certain contexts, it was Nirapirigai that established the term. Because Tannilai was seen appropriate as it accommodated the linguistic semiotic thrust suggested in the notion of subject and subjectivity in the Western context. The expression Tannilai Uruvakkam was used as a descriptive term in a specific context of discussing gender and caste construction. So the compromise was made where there was a little oscillation between whether we can use word Tannilai or Agam. Then later on they used it as an expansion, as an expanded expression like Tannilai Uruvakkam, formation of subjectivity. So that formation they thought accommodated the issue of gender caste questions. Then there was one more translation which was done by C. Mani and Sivakumar, who have translated Jonathan Culler's critical theory into Tamil. They have introduced the word Agami. Because they preferred that term Agam, which have that personal element, and they also wanted to make it a conceptual category, so they made it into Agami. They try to combine the term subject and subjectivity and lay stress on the process of subject construction. The issue here is not just the translation of the concept, but its function in a specific context. Though the expression Tannilai was used even in the 70s and 80s, it received an activist edge in the 90s, especially after its use in group discussions of Nirapirigai. Now, when I refer to Nirapirigai, there was little confusion in my talk. I was referring to Nirapirigai as a magazine. I was also referring to Nirapirigai as an intellectual collective. Because Nirapirigai was the first magazine which conducted group discussion. It's called a Kootu Vivadam. So they announced the issue to be discussed for the next issue, and then they send invitations to all people belonging to all different ideological interests. And then they have a collective meeting, and then they record the meeting, and then they transcribe the discussion in the magazine. So the major part of the magazine carries the discussion about a particular issue. So you have the first issue discussing the East European crisis and the impact of Soviet Union and the crisis that we face in the context of discussing the very idea of identity. Then the next issue discussed the role of media, how media has been hijacked by the state. Then the next three issues discussed about alternative culture. One focused on education, the other one focused on medicine, other one focused on caste question. So, they have a methodology of presenting that. So you cannot actually say that it is a magazine or intellectual collective. Besides discussion, they also publish translations and reviews, and they conduct interviews with so many people. You have interviews with Noam Chomsky and interviews of some lesbians published in some foreign magazine. They got translated, they appeared, and interview with Edward Said appeared. So you have range of things, plus you also have field reports. So if they take a particular issue, then they go for field work and then they record the field report and then they publish it. And they also carry out the responses of the early discussion in the forthcoming issue. So it's a very tricky thing. You cannot simply say that it is a magazine. So that is so there they are able to put the idea of subjectivity into practice. So it is not merely an issue of translating a concept. They are putting into practice. They are using it in practical context. So they have also besides running the magazine, they also conducted conferences. They conducted an exclusive conference on politics and economics in 80s. So which was presided over by George Fernandez. And they also conducted a conference against Poda Act, which was presided over by Kandabiran. And Concha Elia also came for that meeting, and they conducted conference on conference against death penalty. And they also conducted another conference on Pulampeyarndor Manad. It means conference on displaced Tamils, Pulampeyarnda Tamilar Manad. Actually, the conference was not about Pulampeyarnda Tamil. It's not about displaced Tamils. The conference was organized in the context when the special court awarded death penalty for 26 persons in the case related to the assassination of former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. So because it was found out that the LTTE was involved in the killing, the government started looking at the Elam Tamils as criminals. So they were given differential treatment, they were put in camps. So they conducted the conference for stressing that you should not confuse what happened to the Prime Minister with the plight of the refugees who are now in the state. So, the reports of these conferences also appeared in Nirapirigai. So the idea of then all these things happened. It started from 1990 and then it came up to 1998. So the idea was to make use of the idea of subjectivity, the concept of subjectivity. In the first two issues, they made use of Althusser's idea of subjectivity, and they actually made it very clear that you have also translations of Althusser's ideology and ideology of state apparatus, and they have said that they have used Althusser's idea of subjectivity, and later on they moved towards Foucault's idea of subjectivity. In the fourth issue, Foucault's essay Subject and Power appeared in translation, Tamil translation, and Foucault's dialogue with Maoists also appeared in the fifth issue. So they moved on towards different understanding of subjectivity, where they were trying to challenge the binaries that are established through the state or in the popular culture. And then the last, the eighth issue, seventh or eighth issue, they moved towards Gramsci. They had Tamil translation of subaltern studies, and they also had translations of Gramsci's writings. So now Gramsci's writing gave them foothold to move towards the civil society, and they were quite unhappy with the early Marxist opposition of the idea of the state. So because the writings on Gramsci, translations of Gramsci appeared along with the field works of the places where the dead bodies of Dalits were not allowed to cremate in the public crematorium. Okay. So now they mean to suggest that it is not the state that is the problem. It is the civil society that is the problem when it comes to issues concerning gender or caste. So now there is some significant change took place in the late 90s, in the year 1997. So that was very interesting. In the first issue, Nirapirigai, in the cover page, they made an announcement saying that please don't send any literary pieces. So it is not a magazine for literature, it's a serious magazine. Because they wanted, by way of that announcement, they also made that early little magazines a kind of elitist. The whole debate on literature was itself seen as an elitist. But ironically, in 1997, they made an announcement saying that we are bringing out a literary supplement in the next issue. And the next issue would carry a discussion on annihilation of caste. So literature was almost like return of the repressed, coming back in the 97. But now this literary is something different from the literary that was discussed in the from 60s to 80s. Now the literary supplement that came in 97 carried short stories and poems by Dalit writers. You have a survey of Dalit literary history, and you have interviews with Dalit writers, and you also have translations of black writing. You have an essay by Lucy Erigray translated into Tamil. So you have this kind of a different kind of. So this literary, the idea of literary got transformed in the late 90s, and that created the problem because in the year 98 they conducted a conference on Tamil modernist writer Pudume Pittan. Pudume Pittan was a very significant modernist writer. Now that they got exposed to Ambedkar, they got exposed to Dalit writing, they got exposed to marginal ideologies of different cultures. So in the conference, most of the people belonging to Nirapirigai and also other side, they looked at Pudume Pittan as casteist. They quoted passages, I think a similar problem that Professor Aniket addressed in his paper. They quoted somebody this morning session or afternoon they addressed. They quoted passages where the writer has used abusive language while addressing the lower caste people. Okay, so they identified some certain passages from such writings, and then they almost branded Pudume Pittan as an ideologist, casteist. So in that context, Dalit intellectuals intervened, and they said you cannot reduce this kind of an Dalit identity politics for reading literature like that. It is a reductionistic way of writing. Literature has its own norms of reading, and imaginative literature cannot simply be read for ideological ends. So there I think Nirapirigai almost broke, and after that no issue came out. So that was the end of. After something interesting was happening, and you have a separate magazine came out in the name Dalit. This was started by one of the editors of Nirapirigai, and that was Ravi Kumar. He was a Dalit intellectual and activist. I am very glad that CSDS gave us space to publish his writings, translated by me 3 years back. So the magazine Dalit almost methodologically it carried the same framework of Nirapirigai. So in Dalit you have creative writing, you have short stories, and also translations of Latin American literature, black literature, and you have translations of Lévi-Strauss, Hegel, some of the other theoretical pieces. You have translations of Foucault coming. Along with that, you also have interviews with Sainath and Gauri Vishwanathan, Mirananda, so some of the intellectuals who address the issue of caste and gender and other contemporary issues. And there are also certain rereadings. I'll just give you a few examples. One is in an essay on who can talk about Dalits, who can be regarded as Dalits. Because this question kept on coming right from the 90s to 2000, and the question keeps coming in different forums in different intonations. So disturbed by this question, because now the counter question is, no one asked whether a male can be a feminist writer, but the question comes only in the context of Dalit, whether non-Dalit can be a Dalit writer. So it is actually a denial of identity. The question itself is a kind of denial of identity. To substantiate his point, Ravi Kumar says in one article, just as Helen Susu says, all women cannot be feminists, but only women can be feminists. Okay. So he translates that expression by saying that while saying all untouchables cannot be regarded as Dalits, we must understand that only untouchables can become Dalits, can talk about this authentically. Then while talking about Foucault appeared, translation of Foucault's essay appeared in Nirapirigai as well as in Dalit. But the difference is that Foucault was merely translated and he was used for certain programs. But here, Ravi Kumar says in another essay, just as, I quote, just as Foucault reread Bentham to locate operations of power, I tried to read Ambedkar in the light of Foucault to locate the operations of power in Hinduism. So, what you actually see is a kind of reformulation of what you receive. Then another important, very interesting thing that happened in the 2000 was Malcolm X's autobiography, as told to Alex Haley, that Malcolm X's life story was serialized in a Dalit magazine or Dalit Morazu, and it was almost read with enthusiasm by different sects of. It was read by intellectuals as well as by the people who are in the movement. And later on in 2000, Dalit movement decided not to participate in the election. But in 2006, they participated in the election, and in the election campaign, they just circulated the biography of the life story of Malcolm X for the cadres. So Malcolm X was seen not as Malcolm X, but he was seen as a militant who established a new kind of subjectivity. Black Muslim, and that black Muslim was seen as an equivalent of Dalit identity that was coming up in Tamil Nadu. And there was an interesting article about Spivak, who attacks Hegel by saying that Hegel's notion of history in his philosophy of history was Western notion of time and Western notion of history, but here we have a mythological notion of understanding history. And then quoting this paragraph, he says Hegel seems to be emancipatory, because Hegel talks about the twice born Brahminical this thing. He talks about untouchability, but Spivak was not talking about. So I think we prefer Hegel than Spivak. Then followed by, when Edward Said died, they conducted a conference on a memorial conference for Edward Said, where they brought out collections, writings of Edward Said along with his interviews. Where in the introduction, the editor has mentioned that Edward Said was merely used for claiming a victim position of those who are in USA. So there are different Edward Said. We don't want the post-colonial Edward Said. We want the Edward Said who fought for the Palestinian cause. So only by reviving this Edward Said, we can challenge the appropriation of Edward Said, and also we can address questions of power within the local context. Now, this all these rereadings was going along almost parallelly with the insight the Dalit intellectuals had got with the discovery of a 19th century intellectual who was a Buddhist scholar and Siddha medical practitioner called Pandit Ayodhyadas. So now Pandit Ayodhyadas started Dravida Mahajana Sabha in 1891, and he started a magazine in 1907 and it came up to 1914. Now the interesting aspect of Pandit Ayodhyadas was that whatever we are talking in the name of subjectivity today was already there in his writing. That's what the people in the movement they located, and they said which gives a kind of native way of understanding the idea of subjectivity. Now the idea of subjectivity was not something different from the notion of identity. So that was the problem, identity. Because that was the problem which caused the split in the Nirapirigai movement. Because when Nirapirigai movement started in the 1990s, they questioned the very concept of identity. But by the year 1997, they used the issue of concept of identity and then challenged it. So it's as though they are going back to the notion of identity. So they moved apart from that, and then the Dalit movement disagreed with the idea of identity politics, and Bama's Karupu appeared in the year 1994. But even immediately after the publication, Dalit intellectuals created a suspicion about the reception of Bama's Karupu. It got a rosy reception, but Dalit movements, some Ravi Kumar and other writers, they raised the suspicion saying that why should this kind of autobiographical writing be welcomed in the public sphere, which so far was talking about Foucault, Derrida and other things. Now between these two split, between the Nirapirigai and Dalit, something else was happening. That was by a magazine called the Udagam, which is called Media. Actually, only 3 issues came out in this Udagam. It almost challenged the idea of little magazine, the idea of mainstream. One next example is that they brought out an interview with an intellectual called Rocky Mola. They gave a biographical detail for 1 page about that intellectual. They gave a list of books that he wrote, titled Fascinating Fascism, Undressing Derrida. And you have nearly 6 pages of lengthy interview with that intellectual. And then it was said that he worked with lepers in Chengalpet district. He was also an activist and also a theorist. Actually, it was a fictional interview. There is no such person. But in the interview you have traces of Derrida, Foucault, Edward Said, all those things. So the idea is to challenge how the intellectual discourse is once again becoming dominant, while at the same time trying to be emancipatory. That was the idea. So another issue actually opened up how wife of a post-structuralist committed suicide. It actually happened. Why post-structuralists are not willing to talk about this and so on. So it was not anti-intellectual, because if you look at the other pieces that appeared, then you will know that you have the same Foucault appearing, but it is not the Foucault in the same fashion. He was not treated as an intellectual, he was seen as a pointer to something else. So now, Ayodhyadas, the interest on Ayodhyadas is that in Ayodhyadas they found this kind of an oscillation between the notion of identity and subjectivity. It was Pandit Ayodhyadas who introduced the idea of Tamil Buddhism. When he introduced the idea of Tamil Buddhism, the idea is to create an identity for the untouchables. He introduced the idea of Tamil Buddhism, Tamil Buddhist as subjectivity, and parallelly he also started Dravida Mahajana Sabha. where he defined Dravidians not as opposite to Aryans. He never talked about the Aryan, but he defined Dravidians as casteless Tamils. Which means that, and then he goes back to the medieval and Sangam tradition, and then he reinterpreted the Sangam tradition as Buddhist tradition, where there is no room for caste. The Sangam tradition was totally different from the Hindu tradition that is available in other parts of India. So now the issue is Pandit Ayodhya stressed on the identity of Tamil Buddhists because he gave a representation to the British, claiming that they have to be grouped together as Tamil Buddhists in the 1891 census. Then they would get the constitutional safeguards. So, Ayodhya was oscillating between the idea of subjectivity and identity, which you find in the Dalit movements in the late 90s. They denied the idea of identity. They completely disagreed with the kind of reception that Obama and other Dalit writings were receiving. And at the same time, they were also saying that non-Dalits cannot simply use the identity for something else. Dalit itself is not an identity. Dalits must be seen as an subjectivity. Okay. And inspired by the theoretical inputs and the redefinitions, and inspired by the recovery of Pandit Ayodhya and his activities, Dalit movements conducted Dalit Cultural Festival, which I spoke yesterday also, I referred to that. They conducted conference. They conducted conference on annihilation of caste in the early 90s, where you have people coming with the families. There were children and all the people coming, and the conference was one day event, and the first half of the day you have some speaker talking about an important issue that took place, and some major caste clash that took place, and some Dalit intellectuals or personalities, they are honored at the venue, and you have a painting exhibition, you have folk performance. So it's a combination of so many things. It's so different from conference. Then they changed the name into a cultural festival. So it became an annual event in the month of April. So it took place for nearly 7-8 years. Then they were, while having the word festival, they were also quite unhappy that this festival also has a connotation of religiosity. So they went back to the idea of conferences. So no, they were not fixing in one particular notion. That's what I'm saying. Then they introduced the idea of Dalit History Month, which was conducted annually in the month of February. It's modeled on Black History Month conducted in US, and even now they continue to celebrate. They conduct graduation ceremony for Dalits in Chennai and other places. In Neyveli. So this has opened an inquiry into the idea of subjectivity in the Tamil context, lending itself to a theoretically sensitive Dalit identity. This new notion offers, number one, a critique of anti-Brahmin discourse, which strengthens the category called Brahmin. So now they went back to the Dravidian movement, and then they tried to interpret, saying that it is not anti-caste movement, though it was the central agenda of non-Brahmin movement is to attack the Brahmin hegemony. Their argument is that it attacked only the Brahmin hegemony, not the caste. It actually never addressed the caste question. So in a way, the category called the Brahmin got strengthened in the anti-Brahmin debate. You recognized. This is in total contradiction with Ayodhya Pandit's way of looking at the word Brahmin. He looked at the Brahmin in two senses. He categorized one as a real Brahmin, the other one fake Brahmin. The real Brahmin was seen as the native Buddhist who follow a Buddhist way of life in their lifestyle, in their religiosity, in their ritual, in their marriage, everything. The other Brahmin is those Brahmins who follow a ritualistic way of life, who call themselves as Brahmins. So, so he says he is not against the category Brahmin. Now, Azhagarasan was writing in the early 20th century, the non-Brahmin movement started only in 1960. So Periyar comes after that, but nowhere Pandit Azhagarasan was acknowledged in the non-Brahmin discourse. So that was the major debate. You can also defend by saying that that time there was no culture of acknowledging the source. Even in the case of editing Sangam literature, Uwe Samanarayar, who was the chief editor of most of the Sangam texts, he never acknowledged other editors who worked on the Sangam text. The same thing happened with other. So if you look at the culture of that, then you may defend that. But now Dalit movements are saying that they should have acknowledged the contribution of Pandit Azhagarasan. Then there was a self-critique on the notion of Dalit identity and strictly anti-Gandhian critique. So they were quite, as I told you earlier, they were quite uncomfortable with the kind of Dalit identity politics, and the history of Dalit movement in the early 20th century has people like Swami Sahajananda, who is a strong devotee of Nandanar in Chidambaram, and you have Veerammal, who is part of Harijana Seva Sangh, and you also have M.C. Raja, and you have Ratamana Srinivasan, who accompanied Ambedkar in the Roundtable Conference, and all these people are Gandhis, strongly Gandhian. They were Gandhian and they were part of the Harijana Seva Sangh. But they also took up the cause of separate electorate when Ambedkar raised the issue in the 30s. So but it was not seen as a contradiction. See, now scholars are opposing. They are making use of the Dalit identity politics to oppose Gandhi, but you are saying that no, the issue was there, but Dalit intellectuals in the early 20th century, they never maintained it. In fact, Gandhi visited Swami Sahajananda school before the issue of Pune Pact came up. And even after Pune Pact, the debate came up, and even after Swami Sahajananda campaigned for Ambedkar in 1942, once again Gandhi visited the school. So you have that kind of an atmosphere. So we have to historicize that issue, then only we can understand how far our polarization of Gandhi Ambedkar can stand. And such a self-critical position did not remain a notion of the theoretical sphere. Writers like Imayam, Dharman, Pomani strictly resisted the Dalit identity. Now, so far what I have been discussing gave you an impression that it was a theoretical development because it was a theoretical modification of Foucault, Sayre kind of thing. But even without knowing all such developments, writers themselves strongly resisted to this labeling as Dalit writers. Imayam, who was very popular in the late 60s and 70s, and he was part of the communist movement, he never agreed that he can be regarded as a Dalit writer. The same is the case with Imayam and Pomani. In fact, when we compiled this Oxford Anthology of Dalit Writing, he refused to give his piece. He asked one simple question: what is going to be the title of the book? We said it's going to be Oxford Anthology of Tamil Dalit Writing. If you remove the word Dalit, then I will give my piece. So we can't carry his piece. But all the reviewers made it a point to mention that we have eliminated Pomani. We have mentioned it in the introduction, saying that Pomani never agreed to give his piece. But all the reviewers, they mentioned that. So, no, it tells you something that this is the impact of the identity politics, not only among the, but also among the intellectual circle. Now, in the case of Imayam, that is interesting. Imayam wrote his first novel in the year 1984, but he had to revise it so many times, and then it was published in the year 92. That was the time Dalit movement, there was fire of Dalit movement. The story was about how the Dalit community were suppressing another Dalit community, Dalit Paravanas. So he was seen as voice of Brahmin lobby, and then he was almost condemned by range of both by the Dalit movement and also by the Dravidian movement. He could never appear in the public gatherings. But towards the 90s, when the theoretical developments took place, when an awareness of the reduction of Dalit identity politics came up, MIM got recognition. So that was the history. While the first two writers, MIM and Dharman, allowed themselves to be regarded as Dalits, too many refused to be regarded as Dalits till the end. Now that the pendulum oscillates between the notion of identity and subjectivity in the Tamil context, not only in 20th century, which was the case in 19th century activities of Pandit Ayodhyadas. The participation of Dalit movements and intellectuals in Tamil Nadu in the human rights discourse opened the possibilities of moving beyond an objective inquiry into the construction of subjectivity and helped locate the forms and functions of caste subjectivity. Thank you.
Just thinking how it might relate to some of the themes, and then one question I had. So one comment is, it seemed like that even in this idea of subjectivity or everything, people were engaged in maybe, I don't know what we could call it, like a refusal, a conceptual refusal or something. Refusal to settle on the meaning of concept. And like it seems from issue to issue of this magazine, like, this idea of subjectivity or identity or whatever, or even maybe academic, from the academic all the way down to, kind of local, people were redoing it all the time and questioning. I mean, right, the conference is one example of that. And so it raises the question then about this, like, either it's like a radical view of looking at conceptuality, maybe, or that parody and refusal and everything always has to be redone if it is to engage in political movement or something of that nature, or questioning the idea of concept itself in a political situation, So yeah, it's so interesting. And then the second is I just had a question about language, because as far as
of language and knowledge of history and also knowledge of culture. So when he addressed the issue of caste, he never addressed it as a social problem. He looked at it as body politic. He says that he looked at the culture as a body, and then this is a symptom. This is just a symptom. So this is a symptom of something else. So he says that something else has come in. No, he looked at it as a plague. So by way of looking at it as a symptom, he was historicizing the problem. He says that this problem came in only after 12th century. So that is a significant contribution of Pandit Ayodhyadas. There was no idea of untouchability before 12th century, as far as Tamil Nadu is concerned. So evidence of references to the word untouchables who are not allowed to involve in public works, digging well or something, you have such references only after 12th century. So government polity is closely connected to the birth of untouchability in Tamil Nadu. That is his conclusion. Second important thing is he redefines some of the words and festivities. He takes, for example, Diwali. He said Diwali is not Diwali, it is Debavadi. Debavadi is name of a river, and it is a festival where people celebrate the invention of an oil. That oil is
Ginjili oil.
Ginjili oil. So it is celebration of the invention of Ginjili oil. He says that Ginjili oil was very good, and it was invented by a Buddhist monk. He gives the name of the monk, a particular time, and it was good for maintaining equilibrium of body heat, and they take to commemorate the invention of this oil. they celebrate this on a particular day, and then they go and take a dip in the Divavati river, which was later converted into a kind of killing of Narayasura or whatever it is. And he also redefines the Diva Tiruvizha, which is conducted in Tiruvannamalai. He says that is celebration of mustard oil. During darkness, people get a lot of epidemics in darkness. So the king was looking for some light, and a Buddhist monk discovered this mustard oil, and then he also tested it on the top of the hill, whether it affects whether the light of it or the rays emanating from the light affects the people. So to celebrate that, they conduct annual Diva Tiruvizha. So he interprets such festivities, rituals we already conduct, which is already part of the cultural life. And he was also reinterpreting the words. For example, the word Mari is normally seen as rain. But he says, if you use this Mari, then it refers to rain. But actually, chronologically, it should be other Ri. That refers to an epidemic, name of like chicken pox. So the festival of Mariamman is regarded as celebration of rain goddesses, but it is actually a celebration of women Buddhist monk who discovered the medicinal power of neem leaves. So his methodology is partly linguistic and historical and also anthropological. So it's a combination of all the three, because he himself was a Siddha medical practitioner. So there are a lot more things. He also says that Nandana is not an untouchable coolie. He was actually a Buddhist king. He gives exact location of where he ruled and which time he was dethroned with records from Ashoka. So it's a combination of all things. So by way of doing this, he says that untouchability is not something natural which never came from Sangam period, and this tradition is not actually part of Hindu tradition. It's a non-Hindu tradition which needs a different kind of methodology. So the sources that he uses throughout his writings is only literary sources. So which again raises a question how far we can rely upon literary sources for historical research. So, no, it's all debatable. No, he himself says that the Tamil Buddhist identity is a construct. He is not positing as truth. He is saying that it is a construct because there was some other construct that was circulating. So, it is an alternative construct which has emancipatory project, and it also has a political project because he is submitting it to the British government. Then regarding the language, yes, this again comes in 2-3 places about translating theory. This is a continuous issue which was being interrogated in the history of little magazines. People who write in the little magazines, they do not write in the popular magazines. So there was also a criticism from the mainstream, even from the academic sphere, saying that the language of the little magazines are unreadable. Some of them used to say that I can as well read Foucault in English instead of reading this Tamil translation. So that criticism also is there. But what happened in the year 1997 was that the popular magazine India Today brought out a special issue on literature in the year 1995. So there they had writing from nationalist writers and Dravidian writers. So Nirapirigai conducted a meeting in '96, and then they passed a resolution saying that the issue must be soaked with the shit and then sent back to India Today. And it was passed as a resolution, and someone in the audience really did that. Vasanthi was the editor. And in 1997, she came and approached. She personally came and approached. We took your criticism seriously. Now for the next year, for the 97 issue, you have to contribute. Now the question is whether to participate or not to participate, whether to get into mainstream or not. So Nirapirigai took a stand that we should not. So there, the Dalit intellectuals, writers like Rajagaudaman and Bama, Vikmar, a whole range of people, they decided that we were actually fighting for the space. Now we get a space, let us represent. So they participated. So that was also a trigger for the break in Nirapirigai, which also affects the language of Dalit, the kind of issues that appears in the Dalit magazines. Then about the Sri Lankan Elam Buddhist. Actually, people looked at Buddhist in Sri Lanka as relating to Singalas and Tamil as Saivas. And now people are doing research after Pandit Avidya's writings was recovered, saying that the Tamils were the actual inheritors of Buddhism. It was actually taken away by the Sinhalese. I think Peter Schock from Uppsala University made a significant contribution in that area. I think I have answered some